you know that being a successful leader is more than about the hard skills, but what we often call the soft skills. Today we're talking about that with an expert. It's going to be great. Are you ready? Let's get started.
Welcome to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. We are here each week to help you lead more confidently and make a bigger difference, both professionally and personally. This episode is sponsored by Kevin's free weekly e-newsletter, Unleashing Your Remarkable Potential, which is full of articles and resources to help you become a more confident and successful leader. Sign up by going to remarkablepodcast.com/newsletter. And now, here's your host, Kevin.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. I'm glad to have you. I have a great guest today. We're going to talk about his literally brand new book. As this is being released, it's the day after this book comes out. Let me tell you about Steve, and then we'll talk about his book. My guest today is Steve Herz. He's the founder of IF Management, president of the Montag Group, and a talent agent and career advisor. He's leveraged his unique communication gifts and interpersonal skills to build a little company into an industry powerhouse. With multiple divisions, the company and Steve all serve the same purpose: coaching and motivating others to become the best version of themselves, and never settling for just good enough. While it has evolved to impact the lives of CEOs, lawyers, entrepreneurs, and young professionals, Steve's ultimate goal remains using his motivational message and distinct skill set to aid others on their journey to greater heights. He is the author, as I said, of the brand new book, Don't Take Yes for an Answer: Using Authority, Warmth, and Energy to Get Exceptional Results. He's our guest today. And Steve, I'm glad you're here. Welcome.
Kevin, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you having me.
It is my pleasure. So before we get into the book and the ideas in it, I just want you to tell us a little bit about your journey. Sort of like, how did you end up as a talent agent and career advisor? You talk about it early in the book. You tell about a couple of critical junctures in your early career, but just a little bit about sort of how you ended up where you're at.
So, as you referenced in the book, I talk about this. There was a pivotal moment in my life in August of 1990. I was 25 years old, almost 25, 24 actually. And I'm in my second year of law school at Vanderbilt University. And this is a pivotal moment because, you know, when you're competing for these jobs in major law firms, you have to, most of the time, get that sewn up by the end of your second year of law school. And that second year internship associate program is really how you do it. So I came to this law firm in Manhattan, Park Avenue, called Curtis Millay Privot. We come to the end of the summer. Everybody is expecting an offer. Most people get them. And there were 30 people in my summer class. 29 people had gone in for their interview. All 29 had gotten offers. So I thought, they're going to hire everybody. I'm a lock. And the managing partner of the program, Turner Smith, says to me, you know, we know when we don't give someone an offer, it puts a black mark on their record. It's not something we take lightly. But in your case, it was a very easy decision. We're not giving you an offer. And we actually don't think you should continue to be a lawyer, continue on for that career. And he said, I actually think you should consider not even finishing law school. So, but you know, it was obviously a tremendous gut punch to get that at that point in your life. But he also said to me something else that really tempered the whole situation. He said, I happen to think you're a very talented guy. I think you have a lot of great skills and abilities. And we really like you. And we think you're a really great person. And I think you're going to be a great success, just not in this field. And what I would do is I would go start a business and come back here as a client. And that's my advice to you. And, you know, I went home that night and it was, you know, I was obviously unsettled. But over the next few weeks and months, as it kind of sunk into me, I realized he was right. I was in law school for all the wrong reasons. My dad was a successful lawyer. I had two older brothers, uncles, and it was kind of the family business, a lot of cousins who still to this day thrive in that field. And yet it wasn't what I should have been doing. And it took a lot of guts, I think, on the part of this guy, Turner Smith, who really didn't know me other than that summer and really had no reason to honestly be that kind in what seemed like a cruel way. And, you know, I've often thought, they say you got to be cruel to be kind, but sometimes it's kind to be cruel. I know that might sound a little bit disjointed, but he wasn't cruel at all. He was really a very decent person. And one of the interesting things is that I didn't talk to him after that. That was the end of our relationship. And then 30 years later, I write this book, and I've always remembered him. I don't know if he remembered me. And I reached out to him a few months ago and told him the whole story. And he wrote me back one of the nicest emails I've ever gotten. And he took me to lunch at the Yale Club. He's an alum. And we reconnected. And it was as if it was as if it was still August of 1990. And
He did remember you.
He remembered me. He didn't remember exactly the incident as well as I did, but he remembered
Yeah, well,
vaguely enough. And I told him, he changed my life for the better, and that set me off on this path to decide that I wanted to become a sports agent, because that was my love. As a kid, I was a huge sports fan and did every sports job possible in high school and in the college at the University of Michigan, sports writer, worked for the athletic department, on and on. And also loved, like I said, writing and journalism, and eventually got into this field where I represent sportscasters and newscasters. So I feel like I really, really lucked out in life in terms of finding a job that is able to kind of touch upon all the things that I really love and were always interesting to me. And, so that was kind of that was the catalyst for the whole thing.
That's great. So I think of this book as two books, and we didn't talk about this before I hit record, but as a reader, I hear there are two books here. They're absolutely connected. And the first one starts with that story, and you talk a lot about the fact that we as humans in this time aren't always, or maybe even often, getting the real feedback we need. It's being tempered, it's being softened, it's being avoided for all sorts of reasons. And so from my perspective, don't take yes for an answer. That's the first part of the book. It's this idea of how we need to figure out how to give that feedback, and we need to be open to that feedback. So you want to say any more about that? Obviously, the story that you've already told gets at that point. Do you want to say any more about that? I think it's a critical idea, and to which I agree. And so you want to say any more about that, Steve?
Yeah, I think that one of the things I kind of realized after I wrote the book was that it's called Don't Take Yes for an Answer. And a lot of people have asked me, well, how do I give feedback? How do I tell Kevin that he's X or Y? How do I tell Steve? And I say to them, the book is not called Don't Give Yes for an Answer. It's called Don't Take Yes for an Answer. And I wanted to take this from I thought, a different approach, which is we shouldn't be worried as much about helping other people, which is a very nice gesture and it's a nice thought, but help yourself first. And if you have that mindset, instead of thinking what's wrong with Kevin, why don't I think about what's wrong with me? And if I show Kevin what's wrong with me and how invested I am in myself, and we have a relationship, we work together, and I'm constantly asking Kevin, what can I be doing better? How do you think I did in that meeting? What are some things we could have done to get that business or not? Then if I do ever say anything to Kevin, then I think you're going to be more open to that, rather than just like, who is this guy who thinks he sits on high, judging me all the time, rather than ever looking in the mirror himself. And that's one thing. And the other thing about the book is that, it's funny, after I wrote or started to write the book, before it was published, another book came out called Radical Candor, from a woman who had been, I think, a senior executive at Google. And I read it and I thought, with all due respect to this woman, it's a very good book, but I thought, well, then what? What is the point of candor? What specifically can you do with that? What can you do with that kind of feedback? And what should you be seeking out? And that's where you get to the point about this being two books. The first part of the book is really just about, I think, the necessary conditions for change. And that's the mindset shift that one, I think, has to have in order to achieve their great potential or to achieve a great culture in an organization. And that's the mindset shift. But once you have that mindset shift, what do you do with it? And then what sort of shocked me in doing this research is that I had an idea for a book. I started lecturing on this topic, talking about it. And then I had kind of this sense that there was something wrong in the world with respect to the time and energy and resources we dedicate to our careers. When I talk about the technical skills, the hard skills, I went to law school, for example. Everything in law school is about the hard skills. Be a better trial lawyer, learn more about property law, contracts law. Everything's technical. They have a lot of CLE, continuing legal education classes. It's all technical. If you're a doctor, you're going to go for ongoing training to be a better surgeon. What's the best technique to do the knee, the hip, whatever it might be? But there's no dedication to what we pejoratively sometimes call these soft skills, right? And then I came upon this research that was from 1918 from the Carnegie Foundation that said that the connection, the correlation, the causal relationship between your technical skills and your success was only 15%. And I read the entire report, and it was interesting. And I'm not 100% sure that it's really that replicable today. I don't know. But what is interesting is that if you think about it, you're competing in the world, if you're a doctor, dentist, lawyer, whatever it is you do, with other people that are good enough at the hard skills. Like if you lined up 100 dentists and they needed to do a filling, all 100 probably be good enough at it, right?
And oh, by the way, just to add a point to that, you and I as non-dentists can't tell which one of them is better at the technical skills. Like they're past that number. Like that's just table stakes.
Exactly right. It's so good that you said that, because you're so right. We don't even understand when someone's pitching us business, whether this guy's more qualified or not, or he's better at that, whatever. So we got this 85% of quote unquote soft skills that are really the determining factor. And what I realized is that so few people, if any, dedicate the necessary resources to that once they've achieved good enough to excellence at the hard skills. And that's why I wrote the book. And so that's what you do with the radical candor. That's what you do when you don't take yes for an answer. That's what you start working on, because that's the blind spot in your life.
Yeah, we're going to get there in just a second. I just want to say one more thing to everybody as you're listening or watching. Here's the thing. The thing is that I love your point, Steve, that if we will start asking for that feedback, the other person's more likely to be open to it when we want to share it. And so often people ask me, well, I know I can give feedback as the boss or whatever, but what about peer feedback? And in my new book that we're just finishing the manuscript on right now, we have a whole chapter on this very point. And that says that, there are more reasons for us to be open to feedback from people than just position, right? And so your point about creating an environment for it to become a give and take is a critical part of all of that. So the rest of the book is about the 85%, if you want to think about it that way. And you frame it, the subtitle of the book is Using Authority, Warmth, and Energy to Get Exceptional Results. Here's the book. Don't take yes for an answer. But you really use authority, warmth, and energy as the model, and you call it awe, which is great. So let's talk about each of the three a bit. It's how you're sort of framing up that 85%. So talk about authority, warmth, and energy, and just a little bit about why they are so important to all of us.
Okay, so think about your own life, your own career, or anybody who's listening to this. Ultimately, if you want to get customers, keep customers, and what I think is that in terms of that 15% or whatever business you're in, except for very, very few, we all ultimately get commoditized, right? You're selling a product on leadership training and someone else is selling it. And if I wanted to go hire somebody, I could interview 10 people. And I'm not going to know the difference between you and the other 9. You all have good reputations, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, even though it's a great product you have and it's a great thing to get commoditized, you're still commoditized. And so the question becomes, why am I hiring you versus someone else? Why am I going to have influence in the room with my boss? Why am I going to get promoted? Why are my people that are working for me going to really respond to me? So how do I get influence? How do I influence the conversation? That's the ultimate question for me. And the way to do that is to get people to like you, to trust you, to believe in you, to think that you know what you're talking about, and to want to go along with your ideas. That's it. That's what influence is. And so this is just a shorthand way to get there, because I think what I'm trying to teach people is look, I'm not reinventing the wheel here. I'm not talking about things you haven't heard before. What I'm trying to do is talk about it in a way that's actionable and memorable and practicable and something that you can benefit from and easily, really be able to create metrics around it, right? So the authority, warmth, and energy is just that shorthand for getting people to like you and trust you and to go along with you. And so the first piece is that authority piece. And that's the question of, Kevin, again, we'll just use you as an example, right? You obviously know a lot about leadership. You're a well-regarded person in the space.
I'm an
But
easy target because I'm on the call with you, but that's
right,
perfect. Go ahead.
right.
Go ahead.
And I just use
Yeah,
this
no, it's perfect.
hypothetically, right?
Perfect.
So let's just say that I came to you and I'm interviewing people for Eli Lilly because they're in Indianapolis, right?
Yep.
And they're going to hire a leadership trainer, and I go meet with you, and you got this big reputation. So you're coming in, you're in the final three just by virtue of local and big reputation, and you come in and you meet the CEO, and you say, well, I've looked at your business and I see the struggles you're having and I know what's going on with the pandemic. And, I think, like what you might want to do is, this, and, I'm thinking, and you kind of hemming and hawing and using a lot of filler words, and you make some good points, but you really do hem and haw. I think subconsciously that CEO is not going to hire you because he's going to say, wow, remarkable leadership, great business, great reputation. But I just got a bad feeling from that CEO. I just felt like he seemed hesitant. He didn't seem sure of himself. Or, when Kevin couldn't look me in the eye, when he was making a point, his eyes darted away. I don't know. I just felt some doubt about him. Maybe he would do a great job for Coca-Cola, but we're a drug company and we're different. And for whatever reason, I just felt that doubt about him. And so therefore, you may be great. You're completely qualified to handle the Eli Lilly account. But because you didn't come across with stylistic authority, you're not going to get that business, or you're not going to go as far in your organization. And I think there are so many people who have that giant blind spot. And as you know, because you read the book, there's a lot of granularity to what goes into authority and things you should do and things you shouldn't do. And a person could be making so many of those critical mistakes and went to Harvard or good school and
no idea.
MBA, blah, 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 and no idea. And they may do okay because they work really hard and they have all the accreditation, et cetera, but they'll never reach their potential. Never. And that to me is a shame.
So when we talk about authority, and the example that you use, I mean, you didn't use me in the book, but you use that example of how can it is when we get more clear in what we say, and when we take out the filler words, and when we do those things, it helps to transfer the idea of authority, correct?
Yes. Hold on one second. Sorry, Kevin.
That's all right.
Can you just repeat that for a quick second? I was distracted for a moment.
No, that's okay. So when we are clearer in our speaking, when we leave out the filler words, when we do what I'm trying to do right now, it transmits authority much more than that hemming and hawing that you used in the example earlier.
Exactly. And look, it just takes a little bit of practice, and also becoming aware that most people don't even know they use filler words. They don't know they're saying like. They don't know they're saying ums and ahs and so's and reallys and you knows. They have no idea. And if you just figure out a way to get it pointed out to yourself, then we teach them in the book. It's a very easy thing to fix these things if you're committed. It's not hard. And it's the equivalent of getting another advanced degree, because think of how much more influence you have because of your added authority.
So the second of the three pieces is warmth. So talk to me about warmth in terms of what does that look like, and how does that transmit, and how does that help us?
So warmth is really just about a way to build a connection to another person. And ultimately that connection should lead to trust. And again, if you're in the room with Eli Lilly and you're darting your eyes away while he's talking versus when you're talking, that's going to create a lack of trust because you're not really connecting with that person. And if you're not asking questions and really showing genuine interest in what someone else's problem is, what's your business issue here? How can I solve that problem for you? What else is there going on here that I'm not understanding? If you're not genuinely interested in another person, that's going to create a lack of warmth. Now, warmth can show itself up in many ways. It can be smiling, it can be lowering your voice, it can be being attentive to someone, it can be just as simple as a touch on the shoulder in the right moment. But whatever it is that you're doing, you have to create that level of trust with the other individual, because nobody wants to be in a relationship with anybody they don't trust. In fact, not jokingly, but I was saying, as one of my examples before the pandemic, was that you even want to trust your Uber driver. And then today we were on a company call and someone said that they thought that Uber was going to suffer in terms of their business post-pandemic, because people aren't going to necessarily trust that the driver is disease-free
Right.
and has been. So it's just funny that I use that particular example, and now it's really coming home in a very real way. But that's what warmth is. And look, at the end of the day, we don't want to be in a relationship with someone that we don't feel connected with. We might have to be in some situations, and we might stay in a job working for a boss who we don't feel connected with. But again, this book isn't about whether or not there are people that are exceptions to the rule. There are, of course, but it's about you, the individual, and your organization reaching its full potential.
And the third piece of the awe formula: authority, warmth, and energy. Talk about energy. One of the examples you use in the book for energy is Dick Vitale, the sportscaster. But talk to us about the energy piece a bit, because some of us may not feel like that's us, that sort of over exuberant thing. Is that what we have to be to have the kind of energy you're talking about here?
No, not at all. In fact, it's interesting, when I continued to do research for the book, what I realized is that there's all different kinds of energy, but the most important thing about energy is not your energetic output. It's how do you make other people feel, and how do you energize others? So one of the more fascinating, takeaways that I took away from the book, even though I wrote it obviously, but while writing it, is that there is a tremendous way to energize another person just by listening to them, just by being interested in them. And it just shows you how, the idea of authority, warmth, and energy can all play into each other. If you're a very warm person and you're very attentive to another person, and you are listening to them, and you do focus on acknowledging them and understanding things from their perspective, then not only are you going to be able to engender trust from them, but you'll also energize them. But you also have to realize, Kevin, every situation is different. And what I'm trying to say in this book is, try to figure out a way to read the room. And you can learn how to do that. Either you hopefully already know how to do that, but if not, you'll learn in the book. And then what you can do with some practice is you can make those changes on the fly. For example, right? You're in a situation and, like take me, for example, I can be a very high energy guy, as you probably have already noticed, right? I get very excited. But I'm also reading your facial cues right now. We can see each other on this call, thankfully. And if I see you tuning out to me, I'm going to stop. I'm going to lower my voice, or I'm just going to stop talking altogether. But if I see you kind of really excited about what I'm saying, then I can keep going and keep energizing you, because I feel my passion is being transmitted to you. And the only way you can do that is by being able to read those verbal cues and really understand how you're coming across.
Excellent. So I want to, you mentioned the pandemic, and we're recording this at the end of May. It's coming out in the middle of June. We don't know when people will necessarily be, consuming this content. But what are your thoughts about how all of this plays in a world when we're not face-to-face, but we're operating in Zoom, or we're otherwise remote or distant from each other? You have any thoughts, even just in your own life, as you've been preparing for the book to come out, living through this situation? You have thoughts for folks as they're working or leading others in this more remote or distant world?
I do. And I look, I happen to be a fan of Zoom, because I think even in the 30 minutes or so we've spoken and got together for the first time, I feel like we were able to connect. We connected for a few minutes before the call. I do think being able to see you and you see me is a very big part of that connection, which isn't to say we couldn't do it on the phone, but I think it enhances the relationship. And so I think it's a very real connection. Is it going to be the same as if I was in the same room as you? I don't know, maybe not, but I think it's pretty close. If I ever was in your hometown or you were in mine and we had lunch, I certainly wouldn't feel like it was the first time I was meeting you, even though it would be technically. So I think there's a real way to connect with people on Zoom. The other thing is, I think it's really important that you try, when possible, to limit your Zoom conversations to as few people as possible. I think once it gets more than 3 or 4 people, it's really hard to have any kind of true connection with that many people on a call of that nature. It's possible, but then I think the connection is lost, so to speak. So I think if you're somebody who has 50 direct reports, try to break it down into groups of 5. Maybe you have to work a little harder right now, but if you want to keep that connection with your people, I think it's important to do that, to have some of these smaller sessions, whether it's one-on-one or fewer than 5 people. And look, I wrote an article about this that people can get off my website afterward, but when you're working on Zoom, you also have to be very careful about keeping everybody engaged. So if you're the one doing most of the talking and there are 4 or 5 people or more on the Zoom, my advice is call on people and say, Kevin, what do you think of that point I made? And you may just even nod your head like you're doing right now. Or Joe, I see you kind of like, I feel like I lost you there, Joe. Did I lose you? Come on, be honest with me. Thumbs up, thumbs down. What else do I have to say here? And then Joe feels engaged. And even if it's just that tiny little outreach, it's like the equivalent of, and I know you do a lot of public speaking, it's equivalent of when you do public speaking and there might be 50 people in the room. But if you make eye contact somehow over the course of a half an hour speech with 30 or 40 of those people, every one of those 40 people thought you were talking right directly to them.
Yeah.
And it's it's the Bill Clinton thing. Everyone said he always made you feel like you're the only person in the room.
There you go. So when you're not helping sportscasters and newscasters and CEOs get better and helping them see past their blind spots, what do you do for fun, Steve?
So I have 2 kids. I have a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old. I have a lovely wife. We swim, we play tennis. I'm addicted to online chess as a hobby outside of whenever I have some free time. I play 3-minute games, so I don't waste too much time doing it. And, I have a ton of friends, luckily. But life has really taken this crazy turn in the last few months. I mean, we've been sequestered in a house out on Long Island with my wife's cousin and her family. So there's been, 8 or 9 of us here. Luckily, we have a ping pong table, so playing crazy games of ping pong with my cousin. I love sports. I love competing in anything. I mean, we could probably have, near fist fights over a game of checkers.
Well, we'll say that's fun. I guess it's more fun if you win the fist fight, right? So I know we talked about this before too, before I hit record. But so what are you reading these days?
So I'm reading a book called Range by a guy named David Epstein. And, it's funny, Vanderbilt University started this book club. And I joined, and I'm actually one of the quote unquote leaders. And so I really have to read it carefully. But I love the book. It's fascinating. I'm only about probably a third of the way in. But it's really kind of it's a challenge to the whole Malcolm Gladwell theory of the 10,000 hour rule. And he compares in the very beginning the difference between Tiger Woods, who is the ultimate Malcolm Gladwell disciple, so to speak. Earl Woods put a golf club in his hand when he was 6 months old.
Yep.
And then Roger Federer, who is a total generalist. And Epstein makes a pretty compelling point that we really overrate greatly the specialist and we underrate the generalist. And he makes this point that there's only things that are have very repeatable patterns, like chess, for example, or golf, where you have these repeatable patterns that the specialization is what pays off. But if you don't have these repeatable patterns, then really it's the generalist who can thrive better, because you'll be more nimble in the moment. And when the pattern isn't so predictable, you have that dexterity of thought and dexterity of bodily use that you can be better. And just as a small aside, it kind of reminded me of one of the most, to me, the best thing that happened in sports in the last year is something that you may not even remember, but the Philadelphia Phillies were playing an extra inning game last year. I can't remember. I think it was against the Chicago White Sox, and they ran out of players, and they had to put this guy named Vince Velasquez. Velasquez, he's a pitcher. They put him into left field, right? The guy's not a left fielder. He never played left field his whole life. He's just been a pitcher. He's a specialist. And they threw him out in left field, and he made two incredible catches and two unbelievable throws to throw out a guy at home plate to win to save the game for the Philadelphia Phillies. And I thought, like, this is the greatest argument ever for generalization. And people should kind of wake up to this, that this guy's an unbelievable athlete. And if I was a baseball team, I would think, well, I only have 25 players. Maybe I should be playing my other guys in this manner. You know, Babe Ruth, most famously.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, the best part about the book, and hopefully about my book too, is any book that makes you think and question your assumptions about anything, I love. So 4 stars to David Epstein.
Perfect. And so where can we learn more? Speaking of your book, where can we learn more about it? And I know you've got some free stuff on your website. So how can people connect with you? Where do you want to send them? Here's a chance to tell us about that.
So look, I'm on every social media platform, Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff, Instagram. But they just have to go to one place, and that's my website, which is www.steven, STEVEN, Herz, HERZ.com, StevenHerz.com. And they can sign up for any links for social media there. But more importantly, as you pointed out, look, I'd love you to buy the book. But if you don't want to buy the book, then do the next best thing, which is download the free Authority Prep Guide and learn about it. And ultimately, if this message can get out, and like I said to you earlier, if we start teaching this to people in schools and we make this a part of the way people think about their own career, their own future, their own communication style, I personally believe the world's going to be a better place, and I will have achieved everything I set out to do.
There you go. There's one more thing that I set out to do today, and that is to challenge all of you to take some action. Steve has written a book that is actionable. He mentioned that several times. We've talked about things that you can do. So here's my question for all of you. Now what? What are you going to do as a result of this conversation that you've just heard? What action are you going to take? What feedback are you going to ask for? Who might you ask of it? Who ask for it from? Who and what might you need to look at about finding ways to look at your blind spots? What can you do to think about how to build authority, warmth, and energy in your life? If you will take action from this, this will be far more valuable. And I know we'll meet the goal that Steve had for having come on. So Steve, thank you so much for being here. It's a true pleasure to have you and to meet you and for us to spend a few minutes chatting about important stuff.
Thank you, Kevin. Really appreciate it.
So before we go, everybody, we hope that you'll want to continue joining us, to join in our conversation, to get updates, have a hand in how this podcast evolves. And you do all that, how? By joining our social media groups. You can do that on Facebook or LinkedIn. Take your pick. Go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkable.com/LinkedIn to join us there. Hope you'll do that. And I hope you'll be back next week for another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast.